Good evening and welcome to the third day of the 2021 edition of TERI's annual flagship event, the World Sustainable Development Summit, being held under the broad rubric of redefining our common future, safe and secure environment for all. This edition of WSDS marks 20 years of the platform, and it is a matter of great pride for all of us at TERI that you all could join us for this important milestone. We now begin the session for the future, the title, The Future of Air, Progress and Constraints. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Mathur, Director General TERI, for setting the context and for moderating the session. To you, sir.
Thank you very much, Swati, and a very good evening or good morning. Let me just say a good day, wherever you are. This is one of our star-studded sessions. We have with us Dr. Kutty, who is the chairman of the Commission for Air Quality Management in the National Capital Region and adjoining areas. We have Mitch Bernard, the acting president of the National Resources Defense Council in the US. We have James Grant, who as an attorney has huge investment, huge experience in this area. He's the CEO of Client Earth. And we have Priya Shankar, who leads this area in Bloomberg Philanthropies. Now, it's great to have this audience. And as we go ahead, we have all experienced over the past 1 year, as the lockdown occurred, that if you don't have industrial action, if you don't have transport, well, the skies are cleaner. Yet, the numbers indicate, and my colleague Sumit actually measured this in Delhi, yet there were many, many days when the pollution standards were actually breached. And they were breached because it's not just Delhi where the pollution emanates from, it's also from the upstream areas. And as it flows into Delhi, it contributes to the pollution load in the city. So it's very clear that we don't need to look only at Delhi, but at the upstream region as well, irrespective of the geographical jurisdictions that we form. And I was absolutely delighted when the Government of India decided to create the Commission for Air Quality Management for the National Capital Region, that's Delhi and the surrounding areas, and adjoining areas, the upstream areas. And I'm delighted that Dr. Kutty, who chairs that commission, is here with us today. Dr. Kutty was the Chief Secretary of one of the key jurisdictions, Delhi, and the Petroleum Secretary, where he put in a huge number of initiatives, which, amongst other things, looked at reducing the amount of pollution that we produce in this area. And as we go ahead, I will ask Dr. Kutty, Mr. Bernard, Mr. Thornton to move ahead, and then Priya to move ahead and share their thoughts with us. I may also poke a few questions at you to get the debate going. We will also would like you to ask questions which we can put to the audience. So without further ado, Dr. Kutty, thank you very much for joining us. As we look at the air pollution in Delhi, what are the kinds of challenges that you see? And what are the kinds of priorities? I should, in full disclosure, also add that I am also a member of the commission, so I have a vested interest in its success. Dr. Kutty, if I can request you to share your thoughts with us. So you are muted. So could you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Fine. Let me make some preliminary observations about today's theme. It is well understood that the future of humanity intrinsically linked with the quality air. And therefore, it is the responsibility of each one of us to see that air is made clear. Otherwise, we are inviting large-scale health issues and misery to our population. But air pollution control is not a single step. It requires concerted and continuous action. Otherwise, it is going to be difficult. The government of India and all state governments are aware of this. That is why sustained action is being taken for the last many years. Today, nationally, we have some 10 legislations which is touching directly or indirectly air pollution related issues. The latest one is the ordinance which created a Commissioner for Air Quality Management within the National Capital Region and its adjoining areas. And large number of subordinate legislation coming out of this national legislation, like the construction and demolition waste management rules, the municipal solid waste management rules, and the standards of emission notification, they are all in place in respect of large number of industries. See, what has happened at national level, why am I mentioning this is directly relevant to the NCR context. The National Clean Air Program, which has been launched in 2019, attempts to bring the particulate matter concentration 20 to 30% in 102 cities by 2024 compared to 2017 figures. What has been done in the past? You'll be amazed to hear what has been done in the past. In 2016, household domestic PNG supply was just 60%. Today, it is 99.6%. That means more than 28.285 million households today have clean cooking fuel. A preliminary model study done by the IIT Kanpur says the maximum daily value of particulate matter only through this decision has come down from 300 ppm to around 150 ppm, around 350 microgram per cubic meter to 200 microgram per cubic meter. And what the average daily value? It has come down from 182 to 123 microgram per cubic meter. This is by a single decision of the major ramification. Secondly, the generation mix of renewable energy is going to increase from 10% in 2019 to 24% in 2024, and the capacity mix is going to increase from 23% in 2019 to 41% in 2024. And the installed capacity of renewable energy will increase from 79 megawatt in 2019 to 225 megawatt in 2025. You can imagine with such a large scale renewable energy generation, its impact on pollution levels. The third point is, nationally we have introduced BS6 quality fuels, the best quality fuels being found anywhere in the world. Throughout the country it is available, and also BS6 standard vehicles have also been introduced. That means when more and more vehicles are converted into BS and come to the road which are BS6 vehicles, also when these BS6 fuels are being used 3, 4, 5, 6 years, then the transformation and the amount of pollution is going to significantly come down. Next one is, we have achieved major success, especially in cities like Delhi, in using combustion natural gas and cleaner fuels. See what is going to happen nationally. The 10th round of city gas distribution work is going on. When the work is completed in the next 3 to 5 years, 50% of India's geographical area and 70% of India's population will have access to gas, the most clean fuel that we have now, next to renewables. And I just want to mention one or two points, specifically focusing upon urban transport. 13 cities today have metros, and these 13 cities metros is about 750 kilometers, and another 15 metros are under execution, adding to another around 600 kilometers. So large major steps have been taken in the past, and as I mentioned to you, pollution can't be controlled just like offing a tap. It requires continuous action, concerted action, and all these actions which have been taken will lead to reduction in pollution. Let me just give you one example. The good, moderate, and satisfactory days in Delhi increased from 108 days in 2016 to 182 days in 2019 and 227 days in 2020. Similarly, poor to severe air quality days, bad days, reduced from 246 in 2016, 183 days in 2019, and 139 days in 2020. While we understand that pollution is a major issue, whatever that is required to be done is being done, and more efforts are being done. Coming to specifically the national capital and adjoining areas, the most important thing that we are now targeting is how to control stubble burning, agricultural crop residue burning. We are making a framework, we are making a plan of action which can be implemented, consultation with all stakeholders on progress, state government of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, knowledge institutions, agricultural institutions in place. We are in the process of finalizing this. Once this is done, we should be able to have a mechanism and a framework to contain this. Other things which we are doing is we are planning to shift more all the industry to cleaner fuels. In Delhi, with the concerted action, we have achieved this. The remaining part of NCAP, we have actually 52% of the conversion has taken place. The remaining work is in progress. We have built a very robust system of monitoring. This monitoring system has been put in place, and various other measures to monitor and enforce pollution control measures in place. And the most important thing as of today to contain and control pollution is strict enforcement with a minimum human intervention and maximum technology-based interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kutty. I think one of the problems that the Commission and Delhi in general faces is the point that you made, that there's action needed on the cooking side, on the power plants and industry side, on the transport, everywhere. And I think that with the emphasis on stubble burning, it tells us that that is going to be a key area that we need to focus on. Mitch, let me turn to you. There is, as the stubble burning problem shows, or even the transport problem shows, there is a trade-off that is happening between pollution generation on the one side and the kinds of things that are needed for development on the other side. Now, the challenge is, where does this leave air quality? Is there a way to decouple air quality and development? Can we learn and customize solutions that have been found elsewhere?
Well, of course, this is one of the great challenges. Before I address that question directly, let me just say thank you to everyone. Delighted to be part of the discussion today. And Dr. Mathur, I want to thank you in particular for your continued leadership at TERI and for the partnership that we've enjoyed between TERI and NRDC. Just a couple of things, just as background. As you may have heard, we have a new president in the United States. And fortunately, he's somebody who values objective facts and science and who tells the truth. And he's already begun to take action on issues of climate and air pollution as one of his top few priorities. We've literally never had that before in the United States. We have never had an administration that has placed the environment, including air quality and climate, at the top of its agenda.
And Mitch, if I may say, congratulations to NRDC. Your president of NRDC is now let me say, the domestic climate czar in Mr. Biden's cabinet.
She is. Gina McCarthy, who is our former president, left to go work in the White House, and we're very proud of her, and she's ideally suited to that position. And so I miss, I worked with her very, very closely when she was at NRDC, and I miss that, though I'm still, of course, in touch with her, and we're delighted that she is where she is. But just the radical change, I just have to comment on it. The Trump administration was literally the worst environmental administration in the history of the country. And we have now moved suddenly to the most aggressive, vigorous administration we've ever had. So that's a very exciting opportunity. And one of the changes, it's not only domestic within the United States, but President Biden and his people are committed to strengthening the global partnerships that are essential to confronting the climate crisis and other issues of air pollution. And of course, that includes a key partnership between the United States and India. So, Dr. Mathur, there is a tension, of course, between economic development, which is something that needs to occur and that we should all accept and embrace, and the effects of economic development. And I don't think the answer is to stop economic development. I don't think that's possible, and I don't think that's prudent. What we need to do is direct that development and make sure that development happens in ways that are sensitive to the environment. And the reasons for that is that, air pollution kills about 7 million people worldwide every year. And about 10% of those deaths occur in India. And some of the Indian cities, as you know, suffer from some of the worst air pollution in the world. When I was in India in late 2019, in that year, nearly 1 in every 5 deaths across India was linked to air pollution. I mean, that is a stunning statistic, and it underscores the need to make economic development consistent with human health. And there's also, there are other economic issues. It's not just development, but the lost output, economic output from early deaths linked to air pollution cost India in 2019 $37 billion in economic growth. That's according to the Indian Council of Medical Research. And so we are working with our partners and friends in India to try to help to find ways to cut air pollution, to improve air quality, even in the face of extensive economic development. And we're focusing our efforts in Ahmedabad and Pune. And we're learning a lot of lessons as we do that work. And we're taking some of those lessons to the United States and also to China, where we have a presence. And what we're trying to, the pandemic is a kind of vivid reminder of the importance of this issue, because breathing dirty air increases the likelihood of serious illness and even death from COVID-19. We've seen that in the United States, and we've seen it throughout the world. That kind of respiratory vulnerability diminishes the body's capacity to fight off the virus. And so, as the Prime Minister apparently told the group on Wednesday, we have to secure clean and healthy air for everyone, and we have to do that in a just and equitable way. The good news, and here's the good news, is that we have ways to do that. And we have ways to do that protect human health and protect economic productivity. And we've seen that. NRDC has been around in the US for 5 decades, and we've been working on air pollution for that long, for 50 years. And we've had a lot of successes that we're by no means done with the work, but we've had a lot of successes. So since 1970, for example, every dollar that the US has invested as a nation in cleaner air has returned more than $30 in economic benefits. We've invested $65 billion and we've returned $2 trillion. That's according to a study by the US EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And so it takes time to develop laws and regulations and policies that are effective, and it takes persistent effort. But here it's been 2 generations already in the US of scientists, advocates, government officials, public health people to develop these standards, and we keep fighting. And I think what's key is in the US to have federal standards that are strict, that apply nationwide, but also to delegate responsibility to states and localities so that the enforcement is more local. And enforcement is key. You can't just have the policies and the laws and the rules on the books. There has to be vigilance about enforcing them. And the government, when it's enlightened, is a primary enforcer of those laws and regulations in the US, but citizens also have the opportunity to enforce the laws. And that's one of the things we do at NRDC. We go to court to enforce these rules and regulations, because without that, they're just on paper. They're not going to have the practical impact on the ground impact that we want. So just a couple of notes about the work we've been doing in India with our partners there. But since 2019, the National Clean Air Program, as everybody knows, has been focused on city-led efforts to improve air quality across the country. And then last year, the Finance Commission of India began providing help to cities to do that. And that's critical because these things cost money. And in the US, when the federal government, promulgates a rule and doesn't provide funding for the states and localities to implement the rule, it doesn't work so well. There's got to be a combination of laying out this, establishing the standard, and also funding localities so they can actually make that standard real. So, in Ahmedabad and Pune, as I mentioned, the city officials there, and we're working collaboratively with them, with local partner groups, are working to make these programs effective. And one innovation that we think has been important, recognizing that we're not going to solve these problems overnight, is that both of those cities have put in place air information and response plans to protect local residents from dangerous spikes in pollution that exacerbate public health risks, human health risks. And I just want to mention, Dr. Mathur, this is a little bit of advertising. I apologize, but we hot off the press, we have a new issue brief that NRDC has developed along with the Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar, and the Center for Environmental Education. My colleague Polash is going to put it up on the screen just so you see it. You can find this on the NRDC website. And this brief looks at what cities are doing all across India to clean up dirty air. And it's got a lot of information that people may be interested in. And it discusses opportunities to advance clean air under the programs I mentioned, the National Clean Air Program and the Financial Commission grants. We've also done some health co-benefit research in Ahmedabad, which is included in there. And again, you can find this on NRDC's website. So we're going to keep going forward, and we are very proud of our relationships and, you know, kind of the modest role we try to play along with our partners in India to try to solve these problems, which are, you know, significant all over the world. And the idea, going back, Dr. Mathur, to your initial inquiry, is that I don't think we're going to defeat this problem by saying there can be no economic development. I think what we have to do is we have to embrace the reality of economic development, but do it in ways that will protect air quality and protect human health.
Thank you very much, Mitch. I am absolutely delighted also at this brief that you just spoke about, that Pulash put up, and I'm sure that we will all be reading it very carefully. I also noted the flip-flop that has been occurring as far as public policy is concerned. I think in democratic societies we have to live with it. I know, James, I noticed that you know, in the Reagan years, you had been, you know, Mitch talked about citizens' participation, and you had fought this through, I don't know, 80 or some suits that you had filed for the implementation of the Clean Water Act. And again, I mean, I think this is a question that comes up again and again. How do I, as a citizen in the street, move ahead and get the clean air that, you know, is my right? James, all yours.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with you all. Now, you're right. I was trained at NRDC. I worked at NRDC for a long time, and I started a citizen enforcement project there to clean up the water, but also to demonstrate that citizens could enforce the law. So that was, in a way, the overarching ambition, to show that citizens could take an active role in enforcing the law. And then when I came to the EU and started Client Earth 15 years ago, I had that experience, and I looked around to see whether citizens in the EU were enforcing environmental laws. And the answer was not really. I mean, lawyers weren't playing an active role in the environmental movement in the EU. And I thought this was an opportunity to experiment and to see whether those skills that we had developed in a different culture and a different legal culture could be valuable in the European cultures. And the answer was yes. So there was some initial skepticism, and I was told that I was a hyper-aggressive American, and that in Europe people were really very, very polite people. And when they had disagreements, they would get together and quietly discuss them. And I would say that may be right for citizen groups, but that's not what Mercedes does when it has an argument with the government. It sues the hell out of the government. So you're disempowering yourself only, and people are telling you to be polite, and you're don't be so polite. So we started this project 15 years ago, and to enforce laws, and we actually did start with clean air, because I was surprised, even in Europe, that is such a big problem. Numbers of early deaths are estimated to be up to 600,000 a year, even in the EU, in the rich EU. And there was a law that looked pretty good, that was uniform in its application to all EU member states. So we brought the first enforcement cases under it, starting in the UK, and we went up to the Supreme Court. But I should say, and all through Europe, every major city was out of compliance, because governments weren't enforcing the law, and citizens weren't stepping in and requiring them to follow their own laws. So governments would pass a nice-looking law and sort of take credit for it, and everyone would say, "Oh, that's being taken care of somewhere else," and then citizens weren't coming in. So that's what we decided to do, and it has worked. So we had to take the UK up to its own Supreme Court, and in the Supreme Court, the government of the UK stood up and said this to the Supreme Court. which I doubt would happen in the Indian Supreme Court based on what I read about the Indian Supreme Court. But anyway, the UK stood up and said, we admit everything Client Earth is saying. All those people are dying every year, and we admit that the standards apply to us. It's our own law, but we have no intention of complying with the law for at least another 15 years because it's not convenient to do so. And then went on to say, and you, the Supreme Court, may not order us to comply with this law. So a very interesting moment. And the Supreme Court turned to us and said, well, what do you want us to do? We are only the Supreme Court. And we said, order them to comply, give us an injunction. Because unless you do, this is not a government it's not a democratic government under the rule of law. It's government by fiat and diktat. So they gave us that injunction. We've had to go back to court twice to enforce it. Now, the government is still being slow. You're still dragging them along. But we have achieved through this things that would never have happened. So long before they said they would ever look at complying, there's now an ultra-low emission zone in London. And in cities throughout the country, we're getting clean air zones. Now, as soon as we did that, we started bringing cases throughout Europe. So we've done well over 100 cases now in European countries, more than 20 of them. And the experience varies as to how quickly the government will comply. And what we've seen is that the courts have been very reliable in all of these 20 countries. So that in Germany, we brought 30 cases and started in the home of the German motor industry, where they build all the diesel engines in Stuttgart, Düsseldorf, and Munich. Got won cases very quickly, and judges actually prohibited diesel cars from coming into the centers of those cities, which not only drove the car companies nuts, but meant that the people stopped buying diesel cars in large numbers soon. So within 6 months, 25% fall in diesel car purchases, also very good for climate change. So you get the different countries are willing, so the courts are working all across Europe. Different governments are more or less reluctant to follow the court orders. And companies can also still be very sticky about their compliance. So even after we started winning these cases, you saw Volkswagen involved in the Dieselgate scandal, but then many other car companies as well. So what's needed, I think, for us, and I think it was true in America, it's true in Europe, I think it's true in all countries, certainly all democracies, is to say that there needs to be accountability for companies and for governments. So they need to be accountable to follow the laws, and there needs to be good access to justice so that citizens can go and enforce their rights in the courts, and that they have easy access to justice. And then that citizens are willing to take the role of watching over the shoulder of companies and governments and holding them to account when they don't do their job. And they often don't do their job even when well-intentioned, because there's a lot of force on the other side from industrial interests slowing things down. So sometimes back at NRDC, we would sometimes have good government officials say, please sue me so that I can use your lawsuit as an excuse to follow the law. So often I see these lawsuits as friendly towards the government entities you're suing, because there are always very good people in the government wanting to do the right thing. And what's next? Well, better standards, air quality standards, and globally. So even in Europe, the air quality standards are only about half as strong as the WHO says they should be. You're asking about intergovernmental structures. Well, one essentially is the WHO health standard for air pollution. So if countries around the world could adopt the current standard, you begin to get comparability in a way that would be very important. And then clean energy as a way of both building the economy and cleaning up the air. You know, it's vehicles, but it's also coal-fired power stations in particular that are contributing largely to, and agriculture globally, contributing to the air quality problems. And one of the other things we've been doing in Europe is to stop all of the new coal-fired power stations that were slated to be built. And we've stopped all the new ones for the last 15 years. The goal then is to take this experience, so starting with using law in the American legal, political, cultural context, now using it in all of these different European cultures, which are quite different one from the other, and we've been working in China for 7 years, is to go into more Asian countries, particularly the 11 ASEAN countries, and use these skills with local groups to try and reduce air pollution and build economic development by delivering clean energy. So I think all of these things go together, and building clean energy is a central part.
Yeah. So, James, I think that last point that you made kind of hit the nail, because what it tells people is what they can do.
Yeah.
If I buy an electric vehicle, I'm directly contributing to reducing the pollution. And I'll come back to Dr. Kutty in a minute and ask him about the glacially slow speed of justice in India on the one hand, and the other problem that we face with courts, and you may have faced it in other countries also, is the relatively narrow view that courts provide. They will judge on what you have sued and not very much beyond that. But I'll come back to that. But before that, let me go to Priya. Priya, first of all, many thanks. Bloomberg Philanthropies is enabling this discussion. I want to thank you for your support, which has been here for a long time on supporting cleaner air in India. Priya, earlier today, Mr. Michael Bloomberg was on this program, and he was talking about the decoupling of economic growth and pollution, including climate pollution. And clearly, what this support that he's providing through Bloomberg Philanthropies, he is practicing what he is preaching. In your view, what are the kinds, in the years that you have been here, what are the kinds of experiences and challenges that you have observed in this sector?
Thanks so much, Dr. Mathur, and thank you to you and Terry for your partnership. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we're honored to be working in this partnership with you, the Ministry of Environment, and other partners on a technical assistance initiative in support of the National Clean Air Program. I think going back to the sort of this decoupling question and the question that you asked Mitch at the start, I think there's been long discussions of the sort of trade-off between development and improving air quality. But I think we've seen so much sort of rapid technological progress over the last 15 to 20 years that it's really time to be able to sort of decouple and reframe that question, where improving air quality is something that's required for development, as opposed to there being a trade-off between development and improving air quality. And we see that very much in the Indian context and in other developing countries, where many of the sources of air pollution are also reasons of underdevelopment, such as household air pollution and burning of wood and other biomass to provide heating and for cooking in Indian households. And we've seen the kind of radical transformation that's happening now through the Ujjwala scheme, but also if as kind of more and more of these households get powered by renewable energy, could we look to switching to sort of cooking and heating through sources that are powered by renewable energy. Similarly, we've seen Delhi now introducing a very ambitious electric vehicle policy. There's a lot of discussion on electric vehicles in other states and at the national level as well. Could we look to a future where electric vehicles powered by renewable energy and electric buses are what people are using for transport? And I think in terms of looking at where we are, India really has an opportunity to leapfrog the development pathways that the US and Western Europe followed. So we can learn from the experiences of addressing air quality in the US and Western Europe, but we can also look at what's available now in terms of technologies and sustainable development and leapfrog those pathways. We don't have to go down the same path of heavy fossil fuel use, which contributes to a lot of air pollution. Having said that, in terms of some of your question, in terms of some of the challenges that we've encountered working in this space, where we're working with Terry and other partners and supporting work at the national level and in cities, including Patna, Bangalore, and Surat. I think some of the challenges that we see are around the question of prioritization and the need for action on so many fronts. As you mentioned, the sources of air pollution in India are really complex and varied. There's household pollution, there's transport, there's industry, there's power, there's waste burning, and action is really required at so many levels. And that needs a lot of multi-stakeholder collaboration as well as multi-level action, because a lot of sources of pollution aren't coming directly from the city as well. They're coming from regional areas, as the recent Terry study found. So how we enable more multi-level action, more collaboration, and more sort of multi-stakeholder action, I think, is going to be key. And that's why it's really encouraging to see the commission set up and to hear from Dr. Kutty. And I think mechanisms that we can have that bring that kind of coordination and collaboration together will be very important. I think another challenge that we've seen as well is capacity, both on the sort of technical and institutional side. I think there is greater capacity and awareness required. Having spoken about the challenges, I'd also like to share a little bit in terms of what we've seen in other cities around what's really required to drive progress. And this is based very much from the experience in New York City when Mike Bloomberg was mayor, and through policies that he introduced really radically reduced air pollution in the city, but also through what we've seen in cities such as London and Mexico City and other parts of the world. And I think we can identify sort of four things, sort of more processes really that lead to progress. I think the first is better evidence and data and being able to understand where the pollution is coming from and track it. The second is really sort of policy leadership and coordination, having innovation and leadership from the highest levels that drives interagency coordination is really important. The third, which James was talking about, is public awareness and people being engaged and people demanding clean air and having that level of citizen engagement. And the fourth is really partnerships. We'll need action from government, from industry, from civil society, from academia, and from citizens to be able to improve air quality. And I think with all of these, I'm hopeful that progress is possible despite the challenges that I've spoken about. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The kinds of things that you're saying, that's exactly the kinds of questions that we are getting. A year ago, when we would have had a discussion on this, the questions were very different. Now people are asking. We saw that during the COVID lockdown, the anthropogenic activities were responsible for a lot of air pollution. What can we do about this? There are questions, how can people, workers, skilled, unskilled, be made aware of air quality and what they can do? Now, clearly, this is an opportunity. I also see that we have increasing caseload of environmental cases being brought up, particularly as public interest litigations, PILs, in the Supreme Court, and it's something that Dr. Kutty, in his role as Chief Secretary, used to deal with on a daily basis. But Dr. Kutty, let me come back to you. How do we manage this, on the one hand, these huge expectations, but on the other hand, this increased activism also that we are seeing?
See, the issue should be viewed like this. The issue is never adversarial. Fortunately, in India today, federal government, national government, various state governments, judicial bodies, National Against Tribunal, various high courts, Supreme Court of India, they all have played a monumental role in tackling, projecting, and sensitizing the issues of pollution. Some of the most complex decisions, some of the most difficult decisions came through court orders, and the executive effectively used those judgments of the court to get things done.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but at the same time, citizens should play a role. Citizens' ability to play a role has significantly been increased in the past. At the same time, there have been instances when everybody talks about it and the people don't do much as they talk. To cite an example, as during the current festival period just passed by, during Diwali, the Supreme Court of India and the National Green Tribunal ordered that in NCAP there will not be firecrackers. But in spite of that, people violated and burned the firecrackers. What for? It is not that they are illiterate people, they are educated people. We know the ill effects of pollution, but that is why the mere talking by citizens alone will not be good enough. Their passive observance is not good enough. They must play active role in making that pollution understood, issued, addressed, and contributed to the system to make it happen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kutty. I think one of the things that has come out of this discussion is the centrality of the convergence of thinking along of the various stakeholders, including, let me say, the people who are ultimately affected by it, and providing them with clear answers of what they can do. And thankfully, we have these answers now, which we didn't have earlier. Switch to an electric bike, for example. I think as we move ahead, we have huge opportunities. We have opportunities both in terms of technologies, but also in terms of the greater degree of public feeling, both at the political level and at the level of people, that they need to work together. I want to thank you, Dr. Kutty. I want to thank you, Mitch, James, Priya. I want to thank all of you for participating in today's discussion, for the kinds of inputs. And as I said, I want to thank all our participants. The questions this year have been so very different, so much more participative about what is it that I can do than they have been in past years. So without any further ado, let me again thank all of you, and Swati, back to you.
Thank you, sir, for the seamless moderation, and a big thank you to all our panelists for their remarks and insightful discussion. We're grateful to have had an opportunity to be a part of it. I would also like to invite everyone to our next plenary, titled Towards an Enabling Global Environment, Accelerating Women Leadership, which is going to take place very soon, the same platform. Thank you.
Thank you all.